Today we're joined on the phone by Joe Simko and Jeff Zapata. They are the creators, the directors of the film 30 Years of Garbage, the Garbage Pail Kids Story. It's great to have you guys on, and of course I want to ask you first about the new film, 30 Years of Garbage, the Garbage Pail Kids Story. I'm sure the listeners out there have probably at least heard of the Garbage Pail Kids at some point.
Well, the whole thing is a celebration of Garbage Pail Kids in itself, the brand. Joe and I worked with Topps. Joe still works with Topps doing today's Garbage Pail Kids. And I worked with the old generation and including the new generation with Joe before I left Topps to do other things. But the whole thing Joe and I wanted to do was celebrate the brand that he and I worked on for years and the people that we got to know while we did it and respect the history.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I could say is that we definitely wanted to show the artist side of it and how these guys created these cartoonists, essentially underground cartoonists, and what they did and how this thing came about and into a global phenomenon, and then the people who collected it too. So how they felt about it, and then all the controversy and everything that happened, just the domino effect that these cards caused.
And the movie shows our odyssey that we did to bring the story together. When I was at Topps, I always heard who created what, who was there. And when Joe started the documentary and he met up with me, I started telling him what I knew, and then together we just started putting the story together. And what was great is just seeing the odyssey of, and luckily we lived in New York where a lot of these guys were born and bred, and also where Topps was always located. So we were lucky for that. But in the movie, you'll see us as we're going to each interview. Each interview is almost done as we started putting the story together. But I think it's great when you see the film that you see us trying to put the pieces together.
Yeah, I think it's great you guys were able to track down a lot of the original artists and the creators behind the early sets there. And as you mentioned, it's turned into, well, it was a phenomenon, and still new cards coming out today, and it's incredible that it turned out that way. Could you kind of get the sense that the guys who created it could see it still going on 30 years down the road?
Joe, you could tackle that one.
Wow, I bet they probably did not think it would still be, the cards would still be made now in 2017 at the time when they were making them, especially since I guess towards the end of that first run, the sales were just dwindling, or they were just waning in interest from the kids buying them in the late 80s, I guess 88, when they were going up to the 15 series, and then a possible 16 series that just they'd never even printed or went to production. So
back then, besides doing trading cards, a lot of these guys worked for these companies. Let's say greeting card companies, underground comics, independent record labels, and places like Topps, And Topps not only did novelty trading cards, but they also did novelty candy. And it was great to have guys who understood that sort of sense of humor, that Mad magazine sort of sense of humor. And also, which I believe a lot, a New York City, Brooklyn type of humor. And bring that all in. And I think, once you see the film, you kind of see how all these guys were able to work at Topps and why they were useful. And what they always thought was maybe this is just trash, or this is just a novelty thing, just when I drew something for a candy thing. And when they started seeing how much money was coming in, they said, oh, I think we're onto something. But usually it was just something that they designed, and they went on to do something else.
And what was cool was that then, once it did end, and there was this basically wasteland of nothingness for all throughout the 90s, and then when Jeff came in as the art director in the early 2000s, he was part of that team to bring them back as all new series in 2003. So, and it was great that Jeff was able to wrangle in those original guys, John Pound, the original artist, and Tom Bunk, to kind of be a part of that the next generation GPK.
And it was hard. The whole reason why I believe at the time, and I remember, was the pressure of Pokemon. We were doing Pokemon at Tops, and
right.
As my old boss used to say, we were doing gangbusters. We were doing gangbusters for Pokemon, but also you have to pay royalty for that. And someone at Top say, "Don't we have our own Pokemon? That we can do? Why, And we're like, "Yeah, we got Garbage Pail Kids, and we got wacky packages, and And what we first did was introduce wacky packages just to let people know that, hey, we're going to get back into the parody business again, and tested it out. And right when we were doing wacky packs, we said, let's do Garbage Pail Kids. And it was sort of, let's try to do our own. Hopefully the same kids that are buying Pokemon will buy these Garbage Pail Kids. And I don't know what was the thinking there, but at the time that was the general thought of it. And also we still had the dreaded dark cloud of the lawsuit, where we weren't allowed to draw them as they were originally looking like Cabbage Patch dolls, what made them popular. So with this new generation, it had a different look, although it used the same artist, and it relied more on poo and blood and the things that graduated from the 80s, So it was a totally different generation, but same old guys. And then guys like Joe Simko came along and continued to make the brand what it is. And Joe, you should take it from there, and how Garbage Pail Kids these days, and since you took it, and Brent and guys like Brent Engstrom and Mark.
Oh yeah, group Dave Gross, Brent Engstrom, myself, kind of the current team of artists doing Garbage Pail Kids, and totally it spun into a whole new direction, even from the 2000s version, the early 2000s. So I mean, I don't know how far in detail you want to get with that, but it's taken on various incarnations where we do theme sets now, and mini sets and online sets, making those original cards even more valuable, those ones from the 80s and the original art, just very valuable. So very cool to be a part of it.
And what's great, in the film, you really see the graduation of that. You really see it just turn from 1960s Tops offices, and how the ideas they used to do back then for parody cards, how it morphed into Wacky Packs, and then how Wacky Packs morphed into Garbage Pail Kids, and how all these things morphed into other stuff. But when you look at Joe's era, it totally changes from poop to popular things from the 80s to the political cartoons that he did of Trump, and what these guys did today still rings true of what they did in the 80s. So it's still there. And in the movie, you not only see what happened with the cards, but you also see what happened with the, I don't know if you ever heard the Garbage Pail Kid movie in the 80s, but we also talked to the actors in there, and we also talked to a lot of the fans. But one of the best side turns of the movie is talking about the Garbage Pail Kids 80s movie, and talking to the stars of that. I thought that was a great
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, Joe Simko and Jeff Zapata with us, creators of the film 30 Years of Garbage, the Garbage Pail Kids Story. And, back in the 80s, when I grew up, it seemed like everything that, was liked by maybe at least 10 people or so, it seemed to have its own line of trading cards at the time. But do you think because it was controversial, is that why it took off more than the others, just because kids thought they weren't supposed to have them, so they wanted them more?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a combination of a lot of things that really that struck really well. I mean, Cabbage Patch Kids, it was a great rebellion for the boys to, go, although not that, some boys bought Cabbage Patch dolls as well, but it was just a great rebellion against that for the kids. And then having their names, a sticker that had their names attached to it, was more collectible and favorable for kids on the schoolyard to have. The gross out nature, that was like a prerequisite of all almost 80s kid toys at the time, Mad Balls, and where you had like the He-Man, like the snake pit with slime and stuff. So it tapped right into that perfect timing for all that. And definitely the gross out nature was a big thing. And the undesirables by parents, to not have these, or teachers and educators to forbid these.
And as soon as you have your school saying they're not allowed, then forget it. You got a hit,
Yeah.
That was the thing you always, at Tops, you always prayed for. I hope it's going to be banned at schools. Then they'll have to write a story about it, and kids are just going to want it. Definitely, I think that the enticement is making fun of your little sister's doll, in the same time saying something to society, because if you look at Garbage Pail Kids at the time, it made fun of nuclear war, which is atom bomb, and it made fun of stereotypes. And I think everyone could relate to one of those stereotypes in some way.
Yeah, I know they even they had more than one card for Dustin, which is a name that apparently people stopped naming their kids after the early 90s, I think. So it's good to at least see those represented.
Oh, it's funny. When I started joining in 2009, I started at Tops. They used to give us a list of okay, start thinking of gags with names for popular boys' names, that would have been at this time, they're 7 years old now, so it's Aiden and whatever hip name. We had to come up with a whole crop of characters with more modern names.
And that's what we did, but we wouldn't do today's we would think about because we would think about the age group and what were the popular names 10 years ago, 5
right.
years ago. Because if you do it today, it's the kids that are just born.
Oh, no, yeah, right, that's it.
Names. So we actually did it 10 years ago or 12 years ago. What was the name?
So
I remember.
They're 12 now, yeah.
And I would read them. I'm like, who names people, like that anymore? It's just weird names. But now, I don't know. People name their kids Soda, so I don't know.
Well, and that was a funny story Jay Lynch mentioned when they were doing ugly stickers in the 60s. That also, they had names attached to them, but at first he's they didn't work because they were naming them people's names that were from the 30s, like Nellie and Irene and
Helga.
Right. Yeah. And there's no Olga. There's no little kids named with these old people names. So Garbage Pail Kids really hit because they knew how to have the modern names in the 80s and yeah.
And one of the greatest things that we also got in the movie is to get some really tough interviews, where it's people that really don't do interviews or don't like being in front of the camera, or they're very sensitive about the topic because they were co-created it, and and it's that sort of thing. So, but we got interviews from the main artist, John Pound, who usually doesn't do interviews in front of camera and that sort of thing. And we also got the great Art Spiegelman, and that was a great honor to. I was friends with him before the movie, and this is how I got some of the information. Is while I was at Tops, I was saying, "Hey, how do you make these things?" And I would have conversations in his apartment all the time with, which Joe mentioned, the late great good friend of mine, Jay Lynch, who was also interviewed in the movie. He and Art would tell me what Tops was like during those days, and what was the idea of Garbage Pail Kids and all of that stuff. So it was that sort of thing when we made the film, and I got in touch with Joe and was like, God, I heard these things, and we have to talk to this person and talk to that person. And it was just, I think it was a blast for Joe and I just to really talk to these guys and talk shop.
Yeah.
Well, and I imagine finding some of the actors from the Garbage Pail movie must have been tricky. I assume some of those people might have been in hiding after that film came out.
Well, Joe, I think a great story Joe has is the actor that played the child, and he had to go had some problems later on.
Mackenzie Aston, with his rehab bout or that?
Right, because it's interesting. His parents were Patty Duke and the gentleman who played Gomez Adams and the Riddler. For some reason, his name escapes me. But so, this is a child actor, and he had a main part in the Garbage Pail Kid film. Joe can turn
Right. He's the half brother of Sean Astin, who's Goonies and Lord of the Rings, all that.
Sure.
And, but Mackenzie's, he was from Facts. I think I don't know what he did early on, but Facts of Life, and then shows here and there. And I think he's still working, but it was good. Yeah, it was great to get him and his take on the whole thing, and they all they all laugh at what they were part of and appreciate it for what it was. But yeah, I suppose at one, this is in the film too, in his interview. But Mackenzie mentioned how brief period in time in the '90s, and he said, we can leave this in the interview, that he had some dealings that he had to deal with himself personally, and was in a center and had to see a counselor certain times a week or so, dealing with, I suppose it was alcohol issues. And he said there was at one point he had to show the counselor. He didn't have to, but he's like, he pulled up on YouTube a clip of the Garbage Pail Kids movie that he had done as a kid, and the counselor just like, you want a drink? Like, he just like laughs for like 10 minutes after that on the interview. But it was great finding. I mean, we had to get some of these actors and the little people that played the Garbage Pail Kids through agents, but when you get one guy, they have access to the next guy, and they call their buddy, oh, you want to be a part of this? So we were very fortunate. It was something very special to meet these people, and they were all great. I mean, it was really great to get that side of it.
If I may interject, another high point with that, Joe, if you remember, was because of Adam Goldberg, we had access to, was it Sony Studios we were at?
Yeah, Sony Studios in Culver City.
We had the set of the Goldbergs to do these interviews, and plus got to interview Adam on the set as well about his love of the Garbage Pail Kids. So we are always indebted to him, and I'm always going to say thank you for him to let us do that. And it was such a blast just to be able to do that. So
to have the spirit of like the whole 1980s house, because their set was actually like a four-walled. They actually built like the rooms as opposed to just like a wall. So it was like 80s nostalgia everywhere.
He was such a great host too.
Awesome.
So like that was one blast of talking to those actors, and Joe and I and also June, who helped produce the movie and edit, and she's like almost the unsung third director, was there, and it was just one great experience for all of us.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, again, the film 30 Years of Garbage, the Garbage Pail Kids Story, I know it's coming out for streaming soon and making its way to Netflix as well, so a lot of people are going to have a chance to check out the film. That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll have more information as the info comes through us through Indican Pictures. They were just the best place for us. We had a few distributors interested, but they just really championed it, and they're fans of the card, so they're really getting the word out there, and it's looking like September 20th is the date for the streaming. There's pre-order already available on Apple iTunes, and then and it's just going to expand from there into 2018. So we're just hoping it really gets in front of the eyeballs of much more people who don't even know about trading cards. By the way, it's a great history of just the trading card hobby.
Most importantly, the average Joe will get to know these names, and hopefully they'll become more household names in some sort of way. Of talking about Art Spiegelman and John Pound and Jay Lynch and Len Brown and Mark Newgarden. These are like the forefathers of Garbage Pail Kids and the parody card system in Topps.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's a phenomenon for sure. It's incredible that it's lasted 30 years, and the film, again, is going to be out soon for streaming and then making its way to Netflix. If there's maybe a website or somewhere you would direct the listeners to for more info, where would that be?
Well, we're on 30yearsofgarbage.com, 30 with the number 30, and basically our Facebook and Twitter. But Facebook, we put much more up-to-date and pertinent information that's going on more rapidly on there. So the Facebook's just the same, 30 Years of Garbage.
Awesome. Well, again, guys, as a kid of the 80s, I really love this time period, and I'm excited to see the film, and I really appreciate your time today.
Well, we appreciate it, too. Thank you, Doug.
Really appreciate it. Take care.
And again, that was Joe Simko and Jeff Zapata, the directors and creators of the film 30 Years of Garbage, the Garbage Pail Kids Story. Everyone out there probably at least owns some cards or maybe had kids who own cards. Definitely a great story. Again, 30 Years of Garbage, the Garbage Pail Kids Story will be available for streaming and also coming to Netflix. Go to 30yearsofgarbage.com for more info.